I remember years ago attending a play, Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. It was a wonderful presentation of this play. We entered and indwelled that story for 3 full hours, suspending our disbelief and believing there really could be fairies, magical forests, and the ability to turn a man's head into a donkey's. But at the end, we stood up and applauded and walked out of the tent. We did not assume it was narrating the real world. We lived in that story for a moment and then walked out into the real world. The Bible also narrates a drama. When we read it or listen to it being taught, we enter that story and indwell it. But unlike Shakespeare, the Bible claims to be the real world, to tell the true story of the world, and to tell what the world is really like, and what the living God is really doing in history to restore his world. We may not walk out of this story if we believe it to be God's word. We remain in that story, believing it is telling us the truth about the world, and it must more and more become our story. The Bible tells the story of God's long historical journey to restore and save his good creation from sin, idolatry, and the curse. God created a very good world to reflect his glory. Human rebellion corrupted that creation, and the remaining story is how God is restoring his purpose, a story that begins in Israel, comes to its climactic moment in Jesus Christ, his life, death, and resurrection, and continues in the mission of the church to the ends of the earth until Jesus returns to complete the restoration of his purpose. We might see this drama in an unfolding of 6 acts. In this video, we will deal with the first 3. Act 1, God establishes his kingdom, creation. In the opening act, God creates the world to be his kingdom and humanity as the crown of his creation, to discover and cultivate the powers and potentials of the creation. The goal was for humanity, as God's image, to reflect the glory of God into the world in the work of forming a culture that would mirror the wisdom and the love and the compassion and the kindness of God. The curtain comes down on the first act with a tremendous anticipation of God working out his purposes through his human partners in history. Act 2, rebellion in the kingdom, the fall. Things don't go according to plan. Humanity refuses to live under God's word and instead seeks life in rebellion against their Creator. The entire creation is sucked into the wake of human rebellion. All relationships of humanity are affected. Humans are alienated from God, from their fellow human beings, and from the non-human creation. And so we are now in the middle of a mess, a corrupted and polluted creation that no longer reflects God's glory. God's purpose has been thwarted, and the curtain comes down on the second act with the large question looming, what will God do? Act 3, the king chooses Israel, restoration initiated. What will God do? Choose a people and restore the creation through them. Against the dark backdrop of human rebellion and the curse of God, God makes a promise to Abraham. I will restore the blessing of my good creational purpose to you and a nation that will come from you. You will be the means by which I restore blessing and life to the peoples from all the nations and even to the whole creation. God's promise to Abraham is threefold: to form a people to be what Adam and Eve had failed to be, to give them the land which Eden could no longer be, and to restore the lost blessing that God had gifted Adam and Eve in the garden. This promise looks back to Genesis 1 with the commitment of restoring what was lost. The promise looks forward to the end of history when God will fulfill the promise of a people from all nations living on the new creation in the blessing of God. The Old Testament narrates God's plan to restore the creation. In the first scene of Act 3, God forms his people Israel. Especially in the book of Exodus, we see and observe God liberating Israel from bondage to Egyptian idolatry, calling them to be a priestly nation that mediates God's blessing to the nations, giving them the law so they might live as the new humanity, and then coming to dwell among his people so they might know him, worship, and obey him. In the second scene of Act 3, God gives them the land so they might live out a picture of Eden, or even better, of the new creation before the nations. They are to be a showcase of what God intended for human life and a picture of where all of history is going. If they walk according to the law, they will show the wisdom and love, the compassion and holiness and righteousness of God to the nations, and the nations will acknowledge God as the true and the living God. But alas, Israel fails. Even though they were called to be the new humanity, they still have the hearts of the old humanity. And so God sends them into exile to live among the pagan empires. But he gives the promise of good news through the prophets. He will return in power. He will gather them again. He will bring judgment on evil and rid the world of the curse. He will incorporate the nations into that restoration and restore the whole and entire creation. As the curtain falls on Act 3, Israel is stuck in exile. It seems that God's save the world through Israel plan has failed. And yet Israel waits in eager expectation for God to return, to restore Israel, and to get his plan back on track. What will God do to liberate Israel from exile and draw the nations and the whole world into their renewal? We will address this in the next video.